Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Andertons TV, and today my very special guest is none other than Kenny Wayne Shepherd, all the way from his new house. We were just talking about, just moved in a little while ago and hasn't even hung his paintings up and stuff. But Kenny, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, actually. Got all the kids off to school, and so the house is nice and quiet. And hopefully the dog won't come wandering in here. But so far, so good. Everything's pretty nice over here.
Oh, well, we like dogs. Dogs is always a guaranteed extra 10,000 views in a video. So if the dog wants to make an entrance, it's always good. It's always good. Well, look, we're going to talk about your new Fender Signature guitar at some point in this interview, which is awesome. And I'm really excited about that. But let's talk about, I can honestly tell you, I remember you kind of exploding onto the scene back in the early 90s. Blue on Black, one of the coolest tunes. You still hear that on the radio now. It's a great tune. And your guitar playing style has obviously, captured the imagination of millions of fans. But let's talk about, growing up and what it was about the musicians that you heard, and I guess in particular the influence someone like Stevie Ray had on you that developed you as a musician.
Yeah, I'm from Louisiana, so I'm from the South, which is the birthplace of the blues. And so, I grew up, but not just blues music. Like, there's so many different genres that have come out of that area, not just Louisiana, but the entire Gulf Coast with like Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, all of that. So everything from, country music to Southern rock and roll, jazz, blues, gospel music, has a big presence down there as well. And so a lot of musical history in the area that I grew up. So I was exposed to all of that, as a kid, especially because my dad was in radio. And so there was always music playing around the house, and he really loved all kinds of different genres of music. So I was exposed to it all, but it was really something about blues music that I connected with as a kid, because the only thing I can really think is that as a kid, I wasn't necessarily able to relate to the lyrics or the experience that the guy was singing about. But the only real requirement for legitimately playing blues is that you play it with real emotion and play it from your heart. And I think that no matter what age you are, if somebody's playing music straight from the heart and putting, that kind of passion in it, I think anybody can connect with that. And so I believe that I connected with that at a very young age. And so blues music really spoke to me. It stood out to me as the one that really caught my attention the most. And so I grew up really researching the blues and going back to the very beginnings of the blues and finding out about all the people, who made the music what it is today. And people like Stevie Ray Vaughan, when I first met him when I was 7 years old, he changed my life. The way he played guitar with that fire and that passion just was mesmerizing to me. And so I just wanted to learn how to try and play with that kind of intensity and to have that kind of an effect, like, an internal effect on people through my music. And I took that with me, like, from that point forward. But, it's a history. It's like a tradition in blues for musicians to always give credit where credit is due and mention their inspirations and their influences. And so I went back and found out who his influences were and who Jimi Hendrix liked, and even you get back to B.B. King and find out he loved T-Bone Walker, and you just work your way backwards and you find out, you can connect the dots all the way back to the very beginning.
7 is a really young age to be going to gigs and stuff. But was your dad taking you to see live music regularly, even as young as that?
Yeah. So my dad, he did radio, but he also did concert promotion. And so I've been going to concerts. My very first concert, I was 3 years old. And my dad was the promoter of the show, and he brought Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker to town. So that was my very first concert ever at age 3, was Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker. And in my opinion, that would convert anybody to a lifelong blues fan.
Oh, man. You're so lucky growing up. It's such a rich... it's always, isn't it? The ingredients, I think you can see. You've got your parents obviously influenced you heavily. The live music you've been able to go and not just listen to it, actually see it. What's your earliest memory of, I mean, can you even remember that gig at 3 years old, or have you got to go a little bit older till you can have that first, what was the moment the hairs on the back of your neck stood up and you're watching a guitar player and going, wow?
Well, for me, that was that moment with Stevie Ray Vaughan when I saw him play. That was mind-blowing to me. And then probably the next opportunity or the next situation where that happened was seeing ZZ Top and watching Billy Gibbons play. I don't know. I remember going to see almost every concert that came through town. And so it was kind of like I didn't realize how much of a sponge I was at the time. But I was just absorbing all of this stuff. So it wasn't just listening to the music. I was actually going to see these bands play and witness how they put on a show, which also influenced me in my career, watching all these different acts, and how they entertain people and things like that, really had an impact on me when it came to be my opportunity to entertain people.
I know that you're not a sort of you're self-taught as a player. And of course, when you were growing up, there's no YouTube, and I guess even things like, VHS video wouldn't have been, maybe more towards the middle to the end of the 80s, you'd have started to get some VHS video of guitar players. But before then, was your only real opportunity to see how someone was playing, to be there in the flesh and just try and get as close to the front as you could?
It was that and the VHS tapes. I remember, I remember getting my hands on some live video VHS tapes and being able to figure out, like I would always try and sound out a chord by ear and figure out each note. But I was like, something's just not right. But I didn't have, the education musically to know, the different variations of a certain chord. And so I would get a video and then I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's a chord, and then I would figure it out by looking at his hands. And it would be really bummer too, like if the cameraman like switched to a different angle and you missed the opportunity to see the chord, because then it was forever gone. But yeah, that was it. I mean, there was no YouTube. There was, there's a lot of tools that are available to people today, which is pretty incredible when it comes to learning guitar. You can just go on YouTube and find just about anything you're looking for. But yeah, for me, it was a real tedious process, one note at a time. Like if I wanted to know a chord, I would have to listen to the guy play the chord and then figure out, each individual note, like that versus this, and I'd have to try and find those on the neck and then figure out, well, how does my hand actually play those? And then eventually I would figure out the right way to fret the chord.
Is there any example of that where stylistically you play chords differently or licks differently to how some of your heroes played them because of the fact that it was hard to actually see what was being done? You just had to work it out? Or did you, do you play, I guess, is your approach kind of relatively straightforward in terms of how you'd hit those kind of chords and licks?
Well, I mean, I feel like, my approach to playing is pretty straightforward based on my experience of how I learned how to play. But, what's great about surrounding myself with musicians that I think are at the top of their game is that by playing with musicians that have more knowledge than I do about music, I learn things from them. My bass player is incredibly skilled and knowledge and theory and all this stuff. And so I'm going, hey man, what's the next thing here that would go? And, he knows the right answer right off the top of his head, where me, I have to really like spend some time searching for it. So, that's a really great thing. It's like, my shortcomings in my learning process, as I've been successful and been able to play with outstanding musicians, I surround myself with people that I think are, great musicians. They obviously help me rise to the occasion, help me sound better, but they also give me knowledge that I didn't otherwise have. Now,
did you go straight from finishing school into a career as a full-time musician, or was there a few years of doing a day job to make ends meet?
No, so I had a job in school. I had like a part-time job, which is part of a school program. So like it was a marketing class where you were required to have a job and work a certain amount of hours each week. So I actually was like a delivery guy for my dad. My dad had a 1-hour photo printing service, and I would deliver the photos to customers' addresses and stuff. So that was my real job before. At the same time, I was playing gigs around town. But basically, I recorded that first record, Let Better Heights, at the end of my senior year in high school. So in 12th grade, I'm going to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then after school gets out, I'm driving to Memphis, Tennessee, and we're recording Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then driving back on Sunday. We had an arrangement worked out with the school so that I would not fail based on my absences. They allowed me to make up my schoolwork during the week. So I completed that record. I graduated high school and I hit the road, and basically never looked back. Been doing it ever since. Now that's highly unusual. That is not a normal scenario for most people, and I recognize that. But looking back, it was pretty incredible. I feel extremely fortunate. But yes, that's all I've ever known. Basically, is playing music, graduating high school, and getting to do it. And now I'm 43 years old, man. Been doing it almost 30 years, and I'd say it's pretty. To me, sometimes I even can't believe it.
No, that's amazing. And at least you've got that knowledge of being a delivery driver, and they are in demand at the moment, especially this year. So if it all goes to pot, you can fall back on that skill.
For sure.
Now, your band, you've worked closely with Noah Hunt for pretty much all your career. Was that I hope you don't mind me sort of asking this. Is that literally that you just don't like your own voice, or do you just want to be the guitar player and leave someone else to sing? Or what's the reason why so many people who make it to the level that you have end up singing and playing guitar in the same, and fronting the band, but you're obviously quite comfortable not doing that. And yet, so what's your...
Well, to be clear, starting in 2004, on the album The Place You're In, I sang almost the whole record on that record. So that was my fourth. And then after that point, I still kind of sang to varying degrees, because in the beginning, we'll go back. In the very beginning, when I did my first record, there was a lot of pressure on me to sing and to be the lead vocalist. But frankly, when I would open up my mouth, my guitar playing, everybody made such a big deal about my guitar playing being beyond my years. I'm this young kid playing blues music with a feel and, abilities beyond my years, right? But when I would open up my mouth and try and sing, I sounded like a kid.
Right.
And there was no mistaking that. I didn't have the instrument that like somebody like Johnny Lang had, where he opened his mouth and he sounded like he was, 40 years old or something. I didn't have that. And so I knew that was not the voice that I heard from my music. And I didn't have a problem. I had a certain standard that I had for my band and my music. And if I was not able to meet that standard, I didn't have a problem finding somebody else that could. So that was for the first album. We had a lead singer. I sang one song on that record, reluctantly, a song called Riverside. And then after that, we had one guy that sang on the first album, and then we parted ways. And then we brought Noah Hunt in for the second album on Trouble Is, and it's the guy you hear on Blue on Black.
Yeah.
And from that point, I started singing background vocals, and I was fine doing that. I mean, I love to play guitar. That's my first real love when it comes to music. And so I was fine with that. And I still wasn't feeling comfortable enough with my voice to step out front. So 2004 comes along. I wrote an album that was pretty personal to me about a lot of things I'd gone through. And there was a lot of songs about my girl at the time, who is now my wife. And I just felt, this is only appropriate, I think, if I sing this stuff. So that was the motivating factor for me to step in front of the microphone at that point. And then I kind of backed off a little bit. But what really kind of kicked it into high gear for me was I have a side band called The Rides with Stephen Stills from Crosby, Stills and Nash. And he was adamant that I sing and that we share the vocal responsibilities when we were making these records. So I would sing half the record, he would sing half the record. And then I did that every single night on stage when we would tour together. And then now it's kind of evolved to where on my most recent albums, on the past several albums, I've sing half the lead vocals on the records, and then Noah sings the other half. So we have evolved into a band that now has two lead vocalists in the band. And what that enables us to do is have a broader range of material that we can write, record, and cover, because his voice is completely different than my voice. And I think Noah's got one of the greatest voices in blues and rock today, for sure. My voice is completely different than his. And so that gives us an opportunity to do some songs that maybe Noah's voice wouldn't be right for. We can obviously tackle the songs that I can't pull off. So it gives us a lot of flexibility, and I have stepped up into that position. And I've started to enjoy it. The more I do it, the more I'm enjoying it.
Do you tend to, what's the right way of putting this? Are you sort of choosing the songs that you want to sing on based on how complex the guitar parts are, or is it very much based on just whose vocal style or range suits the song the best?
Well, it's a little bit of both, but primarily it's whose voice suits the song the best. And then what happens is that if I have written a part, because I'm not one of those people that can play, I have to there's certain things I can play while I'm singing, and there's certain things that I can't do while I'm singing. So I have to pick and choose. So if the guitar part is too complicated, then in all honesty, I will try and either dumb it down a little bit so that I can sing it and play it, or actually what I have really been experimenting with on this newest record, which is yet to be released. We recorded an album right before the pandemic hit, and we just finished it up. But I've actually been trying to open up the sound of the band and letting them, if I'm singing the lead vocal, let the band carry the song in the verses, and then have the guitar come in during the choruses. And then that frees me up with the opportunity to really focus on my singing in the verses. And so I'm doing a lot of experimenting and trying to figure out what works best for me.
Personally, I cannot sing and play guitar at the same time. My brain, it completely can't do. I can't multitask anything, actually, in fairness, but I certainly can't do that. But I always think when you see guitar players who can appear to be completely separating the two things and doing a great job at both, I do admire that just skill. It's incredibly difficult. But tell me about this. Obviously you've had a amazing career, many albums, constantly touring, gigging, toured with some amazing artists. And then it all kind of came to a halt earlier this year. How did that affect you sort of creatively after sort of, 25, 30 years of being able to go and do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it, to just going, no, that's it now. Yeah. Maybe you can hit the studio in a certain way, but did it bring different things out of you creatively, or has it been quite a frustrating time?
It's for me, it's been really different. I think for some people, man, it gave them an opportunity to really sit at home and woodshed, and I think a lot of people maybe took advantage of the opportunity to start writing new material or whatever. I think everybody's approach to dealing with this has been different. My personal situation is unique in that my wife and I have a very large family, and we have 6 children. And so since I started having children with my wife and we started our family years ago, I started to really pay attention to my touring schedule and trying to strike the right balance between my family life and my professional life, so that I don't neglect my family and I don't neglect my fans, because I have obligations to both. And so I had a thing that was working really well, and where I would be out on tour for maybe 4 or 5 weeks, and then we at a time, and then we would come back. But that was the maximum. Then we would come back home for a week or two, and everybody reconnect with their families, and then we go back out again. But we always had an extended break over winter. So for us, at the end of November, beginning of December, we come off the road. We're home December, January, and February. And so I would have a few months to spend with my family. So I have experience being at home for, months at a time, but not this many months at a time. And so my attention has really been focused on my family. Thankfully, as I mentioned just a minute ago, we recorded a brand new record right at the beginning. We finished it like right at the beginning of March. And so I realized, though, that this is not the time to put out a new album of new material. So instead, we just released a live DVD concert So it's a CD with the live audio, and then also the DVD with the live concert that you can watch at home, because that gives people the opportunity to see the Kenny Wayne Shepherd Band in the comfort of their own home right now while we can't play shows. And we're holding on to the new studio album to try and figure out when the right opportunity is to release that, because we release albums so we can go play shows for people and bring the new music to them in a live setting. And so it doesn't make sense to release that until we know we can do that again. But for me, I was lucky that I did that record, and I already had that record done, because in the beginning, I've just been focusing on spending time with my kids, making this count as much as possible, for quality time with them. And frankly, I wasn't feeling inspired to write music at the beginning of this, because the end game for me is to get up on the stage and play the music for you.
So you would say actually that apart from the upside of spending more time with your family, it's been musically quite a frustrating last 6 or 7 months in terms of just...
Well, yeah, because we pride ourselves in being a great live act, and we've built a reputation for many years, and we're road dogs. I mean, that's what we do, man. Like, we live to be on stage and play for the fans, And so it's been really interesting. You never had something just completely taken away. But look, the reality is we're not the only ones that are going through this. There's a lot of people that are not being allowed to work. There's a lot of people that are, having a hard time financially as a result of all this stuff. There are a lot of people that are just waiting for things to go back to normal. We're not alone in this, right? But it is frustrating. I think there's a lot of musicians, because not only is this like what we live to do, I think this also helps musicians stay sane to a degree. This is like our therapy, right? And so I think that, a lot of, some people are probably going a bit stir crazy and not being able to get out there and, experience that.
Yeah, I think most guys, especially, I think musicians that I know over the last 6 or 7 months have really, really found it difficult. And they don't even really know quite why. It's not because they've been ill or because necessarily, I mean, I know there's a lot of hardship out there at the moment, but not necessarily that. I think it's just emotionally, this whole, if you've been so used to having a creative outlet, being able to go and play music, play with your friends, all that kind of stuff, and it gets taken away from you. It's been tough, hasn't it? And, fingers crossed, we can hear your new album and you can be back on the road, sometime next year. Anyway, we need to nerd out now and talk about gear, because that's kind of what we do on this channel. So with no particular place to start, but I'm just trying to think. In my mind now, I'm trying to see a picture of you playing anything other than a Strat. And I'm sure they exist, but nothing's coming to mind. So can we talk about your sort of love affair with the Strat and any other guitars that maybe you, perhaps I should be thinking of a picture of you that I just can't think of at the moment. But, has there been any other little love affairs with other styles of guitars over the years?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, my first love as an instrument is the Strat. I mean, that's obvious. And so many of my heroes, that's the introduction for most of us, I think, or maybe even for all of us, is that somebody you admire is playing that guitar, and it has an impression on you that's larger than life, And for me, it was the Strat. It was Jimi Hendrix, it was Stevie Ray Vaughan, it was Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy. I mean, the list goes on and on. Jeff Beck, Robert Cray, just so many people. And those are more, rock and blues, but there's so many Strat players across so many genres that have created so much timeless music. And I would just see it time and time again on stage. And the sound that they were getting out of it was the sound that I heard, that I wanted to find, that I wanted to tap into and relay, through my hands. And so also ergonomically, it's just set up right for me. And I don't know if it's that the guitar is set up right for me or if that I have adapted that much to the guitar over the years, but everything just feels like it's in the right place for the way that I play it. I do play the guitars, and I mean, I have to be honest with you, like Billy Gibbons, there's a record by ZZ Top called Fandango, and it's half live and half studio recording. But the live stuff on that record, that's the best. If you ask like the holy grail of sounds for a Les Paul, that is the album I would do. To have that sound as well. So I do have some Les Pauls and I have some humbucker guitars and things like that. But the thing is like, you know, I guess because I've been playing this for so long and everything's down here, and my stroke is real broad in my playing when I play rhythm. And a lot of times when I play other guitars with the pickup selector up here, I find that I'm accidentally hitting it and then it goes to the position that I don't want it in. And so adapting, you know, those habits of playing a Strat on other instruments can be a little frustrating for me at times. But there's pictures of me playing Les Pauls, there's pictures of me playing 335s, you know, I've got a lot of other guitars and I appreciate all of them. But this is definitely, if I was on a desert island and, you know, only had one guitar, this would be the one that I would grab.
And when you're playing guitars, was there is there a holy grail of specification from a 60s Strat or something, or are you playing with modern innovations in terms of, I don't know, pickups and fretboard radiuses and stuff like that? What would be your, what's all the inspiration that's gone into the current, Kenny Wayne Shepherd Signature Strat?
Well, this guitar is heavily inspired, not visually necessarily, but technically inspired by the elements that are all come together on my 1961 Strat, which is like, for me, that's the best playing Strat. I mean, I've played a lot of vintage guitars of all makes and models, and I've played a lot of vintage Strats, and just because a guitar is old doesn't mean it sounds great or plays great. I mean, every guitar is an individual, and they all, have their own merits and shortcomings. And so I played a lot of old Strats that I just didn't like. That one was the one that did it for me. It was the one that I picked up, and in that moment, everything about it was perfect, and it always has. And that's the bar for me that all guitars are compared to. So every guitar that we've tried to create over the years with collaborating with Fender, I focused a lot of attention on the neck and trying to really get close to duplicating the neck on my 61 Strat. This is the closest that we've ever come. So we messed with, in the beginning of developing this guitar, the last Signature model had a 12-inch radius, so it was a lot flatter and, it was supposed to play faster. It had a much thicker neck. But the profile and the tapering and the pocket and all that stuff was modeled after my 61, but a completely different playing neck for my 61. It had a similar feel to a degree. This one, we started with a 12-inch, and we did a 9.5. But what I realized was all my custom shop Strats, my 61 Strat, they're all 7 1/4 vintage spec, and we put the jumbo frets on them, and that kind of helps eliminate issues that you would have with bending. So if I wanted this to be a real example of what I play on a regular basis on stage most of the time, we went with a 7 1/4 radius. So I mean, that's what's on my 61. That's what's on this guitar. We put the Graph Tech saddles, which I put on my 61 Strat back when I was like 18 or 19 years old. We start with the output of those pickups on my 61 Strat. We measure the output. We try to match that with these pickups, but we fine-tuned them. We made these a little hotter than the last Signature guitar, but what's interesting is there's more clarity and there's less hum, even though you get a little more output out of them. And we kind of, increase the response across the entire range. And so they're very responsive to touch and play and dynamics and things like that. And so, those things are like direct takeaways from my 61 Strat. Obviously, a Strat has a lot of the same features, but the neck, the frets, the output of the pickups, the Graph Tech saddles, all those things are direct takeaways from my 61 Strat.
It really amuses me that in my life playing guitar, which I'm 2 or 3 years older than you, but I expect, it's a similar kind of period of time playing. We got told that the 7 1/4 inch radius fretboard was not good. It's just like you couldn't bend notes, and the strings would choke if you were bending above the sort of 15th fret, and it's like 9.5, and then other brands would go flatter and flatter. And then more recently, a couple of famous artists have just gone, well, I don't know if that's the case really. I think 7 1/4 is kind of fine, and so everybody's now picking up these vintage radius fretboard guitars and going, yeah, there's really nothing wrong with this. I don't know why we changed it in the first place.
Right.
And it's crazy, you know, it's a beautiful feeling guitar.
Well, what's interesting, I agree with you, but what's interesting is like there's all this, people revere these vintage instruments. Like they put these vintage Strats on a pedestal and they're like, oh my gosh, the sound of a vintage, 50s, 60s Strat. Well, that's a 7 1/4 radius, right? So, I mean, if you really love those guitars,
Yeah,
that's what you're going to be playing. If you go buy one of those, you throw $30,000 on a vintage Strat, you're going to get a 7 1/4. So,
yeah.
hopefully you'll like it.
Do you obsess a bit with vintage guitars? I mean, I don't know if anybody obsesses quite to the level of someone like Joe Bonamassa, but do you have a collection of, is that sort of, something one of the rooms in your house with like, loads of 50s and 60s Strats hanging up?
So Joe and I are good friends, and I really admire what he's done as far as like the collection that he has created for himself. Part of me wishes that I would have like collected guitars when I was younger. I think everybody wishes because they were cheaper. But I never fancied myself to be a collector. I have a lot of guitars. I've never actually lined them all up and counted them. I'd say I probably have close to 200 guitars. But I don't consider myself to be a collector. I feel like each one really is there to serve a purpose. Where I think Joe really considers himself to be a custodian of these guitars. I mean, he plays a lot of them as well, but like he's preserving them. I bought a 1958 Strat back in the 90s. I was out on tour with Van Halen, and I went into a Guitar Center and did an in-store autograph signing, and then I noticed up on the wall was a hardtail 3-tone Sunburst 58 Strat, brand new guitar. I mean, it was literally the old man bought it, never played it, stuck it under his bed. He passed away. His wife brought it in a Guitar Center and sold it to them, and then I bought it from them. But it looked brand new. It was a brand new 58 Strat. And then I took it on stage that night, and I started playing it, and literally now that guitar is almost as worn as my 61 Strat is. And I realized in that experience that I'm not the kind of guy that needs to have a bunch of mint condition vintage guitars, because I'm really hard on instruments. I play really hard. I use a heavy pick, and I just wear them out. And so the collectability is affected by that. And I just don't think I'm the guy to have all these mint condition things, because I'm really rough on my equipment. So I think that's part of the reason why I didn't amass a huge collection of vintage guitars as well.
And where's the who are the block inlays a nod towards? I mean, is that a guitar player that you particularly admire that had one of those kind of 70s era sort of instruments, or is that just something that you like because it's a little different? Or
no. So briefly in 66 and 67, I think Fender, they were experimenting with bound necks on Strats, and a couple of those were made, or a few of those were made, and then there was a few guitars that made it out of the factory with block inlays and bound necks as well. So this was kind of a nod to like we try to bring a lot of elements together that have been features of Stratocasters over the years, but not necessarily found their way all together in one production model, right? But we didn't want to go, at the same time, it's like it all had to make sense. It had to visually be striking, but also cohesive, right? Like I knew the block inlays would probably get some pushback from some purists, some old guys that think that only, dots are the only thing you should ever see on a Strat. And I can dig that. I respect that. But for me, I wanted, when people see this guitar, I want them to know immediately that it's something different. And this is not, we're not going outside the box to something that's never been done on a Strat before here. So the one thing that we did do is we split the 12th fret. And then this is actually one of the prototype models. So this was prior to adding another marker up here to make it more symmetrical to my eye. But, we did a matching headstock. We went and put the Signature back on the front of the guitar, like the original Signature series were done when they first started doing them. So these are all elements, and it's functional, by the way. It's not just aesthetic. It's functional. Like the binding and the block inlays make make it a lot easier to keep track of where you're at on the neck, especially in dimly lit or darker situations on stage. So there's a functional purpose behind it all as well.
I think it's a beautiful looking guitar. I think I was saying just before we started rolling, you cannot get them for love nor money over here. It's as fast as they arrive, they're gone. I know it's frustrating. There was one over here that we had lined up for the interview. I had it with me 2 days ago. It was earmarked for this video, like do not sell this before the video. And like 5 minutes later, I'm going, where's that guitar gone? And it's like, oh, we just sold it to this dude. So I'm like, no, I need it for the interview. But it's like, oh man, but it's super popular. I think it's a great spec guitar. It looks beautiful. I'm a fan of, even down to the nitro finish. I think that's there's always something, when you're looking for that last 0.5% and you don't really know what it is, quite often you just end up going, maybe it's the finish. And I'm sure some of that contributes to the way it feels and sounds.
Yeah, and the ash body, so like we experimented with alder. This particular model is one of the prototypes. This is an alder finish. And so what I realized is that there's not enough grain that pops through on alder for you to really be able to fully appreciate the translucent color. So we wanted a one-of-a-kind color for this guitar as well. So we took a factory color, which was the sonic blue, and created a custom color out of it. And, so it's translucent sonic blue. But to fully be able to appreciate that, you need to be able to see the wood grain. And all those awesome guitars, those Fender guitars, the Mary Kay models, the early 50s Strats, the two-tone sunburst with all that awesome grain, those are all ash bodies. So we knew that we needed to go with an ash body to really fully appreciate the color of this guitar. But sometimes ash can be heavy. And so we decided we would do the chambered version, which the minute you pick the guitar, you're like, oh my gosh, this guitar is so light. It immediately leaves an impression on you the moment you pick it up. But it's more resonant. It really projects acoustically, and it gives it a pretty cool sound. And to me, to my ear, there's not a lot of difference between the sound of an alder body and an ash body. I think you really come down, you're splitting a lot of hairs, especially when you're playing an electric instrument through an amplifier that, and if you have pedals, it's like there's so many different things that are affecting the sound of your guitar. You're kind of splitting hairs, and I thought it was more visually appropriate, to have that ash body so you can fully appreciate the color.
Well, congratulations with what you and the guys at Fender have come up with there. It's difficult to take an instrument that's in its 7th decade now and bring something new to the party again. But I think it's visually very, very distinctive, and it's a great sounding and playing guitar. So well done on that front. We should talk. You mentioned about the plugging into pedals and amplifiers and stuff. Has that changed very much for you in your career, or are you still finding you're plugging into the same amps and using the same pedals as you were at the start?
I mean, it hasn't. I try a lot of new things, and people will send me things to try out, and I mean, I like that people are continuing to try and innovate, but at the same time, a lot of what's happened recently in the guitar world is that we have 15 different versions of the same pedal, just in different colors. And a lot of times we're just trying to reinvent the wheel, I don't know how many different tube screamer variants we actually need. Like, there's a tube screamer for a reason. You can go get a tube screamer if you want a tube screamer. So at a certain point I go, yeah, I don't need to try like the 78th version of the TS-808. I got mine. I have an original. I have a couple of original ones. I have some reissues. I have some modified ones. I'm good on those. But I also, have found that over the years, I found kind of what works for me, and I haven't really felt the need to go too far beyond that either. What I have tried to do is to find more roadworthy components and reliable effects that also get the authentic sound. So the biggest challenge was the Univibe. So I have several original Univibes. One of them allegedly belonged to Jimi Hendrix himself, but those things are fundamentally fragile items, right? If they get banged around too much, they break very quickly. So, but there's a lot of different Univibe pedals on the market, and amazingly enough, my guitar tech actually makes what I believe is one of the most authentic Univibe, replicas or whatever you want to call it. It's like, it's down to the light bulb and everything. He's got it down to a science. but it's roadworthy and it's in a more compact housing. And so that thing gets banged around constantly on the road. I don't have to worry about it breaking. It doesn't break, and I don't have to worry about my original having to be repaired. So just trying to find authentic versions of the original pedals that are more durable has really been what's on my radar. The biggest investment in my tone that I've made in recent years has been in amplifiers. And I got hooked up with Alexander Dumble, I guess probably, I don't know, 11 years ago or something like that, maybe a little longer, and started, different amps with him. And it's just taken my tone and my playing and to a different level, and it's really inspired me, because it frees you up when you have an amplifier that responds to your playing exactly the way you want it to. It frees you up to explore new ideas and go into new directions because you're not having to try so hard to coax something out of the instrument. It's just happening on its own intuitively. And so that's been a game changer for me. It's been the amplifiers.
That is some exclusive club if you're in the Alexander Dumble Club. It's like, is everything true that you hear about how choosy he is about artists that he wants to work with, and the lengths that he will go into design amps that he feels that fits your playing style and stuff?
So I can only speak to my own experience with him, right? Like I can't speak to anybody else's or any rumors or anything like that about him. I can only tell you from my experience, he's one of the nicest people that I know. And he is, in my opinion, a bona fide genius, especially when it comes to electronics and things like that. But his knowledge goes way beyond that. Like he's talked to me about all kinds of things that I'm like, how does this guy know this stuff? And anyway, and the links that he goes to, yes, he goes very far. He builds these amps. It's like a tailor-made suit, he really sits there and listens to me play the guitar, and he intuitively knows what I'm trying to get the amp to do. And I think then he rolls his sleeves up and goes to work. And the next thing you know, I'm showing back up when he says it's time to come plug into the amp, and then I'm plugging into an amplifier that does everything that I could ever have hoped for it to do based around my style of playing and the way my attack and the way that I'm trying to get the amplifiers to respond.
I would love to meet him. I mean, I've do you hear so many? I think it's like everybody. The myth is probably, as you say, the myth is probably more outrageous than the reality. But he just sounds. He's been such an influential person in terms of great guitar tone. The number of great guitar players that put such a big part of their tone down to his amp designs.
Well, a lot of people, one of the things that his amplifiers do is they're very revealing about your playing, right? Like every little nuance and as a result, every little mistake that you might make is revealed. And so if you're the kind of guy that, if you want to know where you're at with your accuracy and your technique and all that stuff, plug right into one of his amps and you'll find out everything you need to know. And for they like it and it works for them and it helps them, with their playing and stuff. But I think some people are, maybe that's not what they're looking for. But the hype is there for a reason. You don't get that kind of a reputation because it's snake oil. You just don't. Like, it does not happen. Like, it's the real deal. And for me, it's been a game changer.
Oh, that's cool, man. Well, that's amazing. And I guess if you've gone to that length to achieve an amp with that amount of dynamics, or not just an amp, but a rig with that amount of dynamics, I'm guessing for you, you'll be like one of the last people on the planet that'll go digital with regards to, trying to recreate your guitar tone, right?
Oh, no. That's not my style. I mean, that stuff is cool for like, if I'm like, if I need something portable, I have this little, modeling thing that I can carry around. I just plug in a hotel room or something like that, but never, you're never going to see me try and like create a copy of one of my amps and then be using that on stage.
Well, good for you, man. Keeping the tubes alive. Well, look, I think we're kind of reaching the end of this interview. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Really excited to hear the new album. Do you have a release date for the album yet?
No, right now, like I said, all of our efforts are really focused on, the live
The
DVD
live
concert.
one.
And again, I'm just, I can't really nail down a date until somebody can tell us when we can actually go back out on the road, because, we put this record out. I want people, to be able to get it and listen
Yeah.
to it. I want them to be able to come see us play it. I want to come over there to the UK and Europe and be able to step on stage and play these songs for people. So that's all a key part of the process for me. So that remains to be seen.
Well, okay. Well, let us know, when that does come out. I'll keep an eye on the website and see when it comes out, because I'd like to hear that. And
Right.
yeah, really looking forward to seeing you touring again. Good luck with the guitar. Enjoy spending more time with your wife and kids. It's probably
Yeah,
a one in a lifetime opportunity to be at home for this long, for sure. And
right.
and good luck hanging your pictures up and settling in your new home. So.
Thank you.
But look, a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for spending the time with us. And everybody, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, woo!
Cheers.
Thanks a lot, man. Take care. See you soon.
Thanks.